Hey, badass business owners, I'm going to bet that at some point someone told you that business is so easy. All you do is you sell something, you subtract your costs, and then you've got your profit. So you go out and let's just say you sell these pens. You go out, you buy a bunch of these pens, and you just start selling them. And you're like, hey, I paid 50 cents for every pen. I'm going to sell them for $1, and I'm going to make 50 cents every single time that I sell that pen. Only to find out that at the end of the day, you didn't quite have the profit that you thought. And part of the reason is we confuse cost of goods and expenses all of the time. And we don't understand that a lot of times when we're thinking of our costs, we're thinking of our cost of goods. But unfortunately, it's the expenses that tend to come back and bite us in the butt. So what exactly is the difference between these two? Well, let me step back for a second because this is something that I see all the time when I'm helping people with their books is they will get materials and I'll say, hey, why did you go to Amazon or why did you go to Home Depot or why did you go to Lowe's or whatever? And they're like, oh, those are for just materials and costs for whatever it is that they do. Only to find out that they've been lumping everything together. And the reality is they're two different things. So let's just say that you go to Home Depot and you go and purchase stuff for you to be able to do the business that it is that you're doing. The only problem is some of the things that you're purchasing, you actually use as part of what it is that you're doing. So it might be materials that you need to build something. It might be materials that you need to install something. But you also picked up a hammer, a drill, some gloves, some cleaning materials, or whatever. Well, those aren't cost of goods. Those are actually expenses, and they're not to be lumped together because they're two totally different things. You're not going to be able to understand what your potential profit is if you're lumping everything together. So the reality is if you went and bought lumber or you bought pipes or supplies or whatever, those would be cost of goods. But the other items that you bought that you use every day are just regular job supplies that you're using. And one of the very first things that I start doing with people is I start separating those out because those are what we call business expenses, operational expenses, money that you have to spend to be able to run your business. And a lot of times people don't realize that, honestly, the tools that you're using, the cleaning materials, if you got to go out and get sanding discs, stuff like that, well, you might use it up on that job. It's just part of the materials that you show up to the job with. And that's a big part of where it gets separated because you have two different types of profits. You have what's called gross profit, and gross profit is your sales minus those cost of goods. That's going to give you your gross profit, your potential profit, if you will. Then you have your business expenses. Not only are they these job materials that I'm talking about, it's all the other expenses that you have in order to run your business. It could be insurance, it could be maintenance and stuff, repairs on your truck, your vehicle. It could be, advertising that you're doing. It could be a host of other things. Watch some of the other videos where I talk about profit and loss statements, and it'll walk you through those things. Then you're going to get your net income or your net profit, which is after those expenses. And what happens is because we confuse those, there are times when I'm looking at somebody's profit and loss so they can try to understand their business and they don't have any cost of goods and they put everything into their expenses, or vice versa. They have everything in their mother up in cost of goods and a lot of those items belong in expenses. The thing to keep in mind is what exactly is cost of goods? Well, cost of goods is any money that you must spend in order to provide or make your product or service. So if I have to purchase materials and those materials ultimately end up with the client or the customer, then those are part of my cost of goods. If I just buy the pen and turn around and sell it, my cost of goods is going to be the pen. However, if I buy the pen in pieces and I have to then put the pen together, I have labor costs also because I can't just sell the pen in the parts. I mean, I can, but if I sell them a fully assembled pen, now I've got the materials for the pen and I also have the labor hours that I've used to be able to put these pens together. Once again, cost of goods, money that is spent to provide or make the product or service. However, if I have to now come back and I have to make sure these pens are nice and clean because they come to me all gross and grimy, right? And then I've got to clean them up and I've got to go buy cleaning materials or sandpaper or whatever the case may be, those are supplies for me to operate my business because I purchased these materials, but they're not ready for sale yet. I have to do stuff to them in order to sell them. Now I am looking at job supplies, which are more on the expense side of the equation of running my business. Even if you use it and then you throw it away for each customer, it's still not cost of goods. It's something that you have to do to be able to provide that product or service. So once again, it's an operational type expense. And I'm trying to think of some different examples that I see out there all the time to try to help you understand the difference. You might be going, Tammy, why do I care? They're all expenses. They're all costs of running my business. I get it. And you know what? Can you run your business like that? Sure. Are you running the best business that you could be running? No. Because you really want to try to work both ends of the equation. You want to try to say, how can I make sure I'm priced correctly? And I'm going to be priced correctly if I know how much the cost to actually provide that product or service is, because I know I need to make 30%, 40%, 50%, whatever the case may be, after my costs in order to pay for all of my expenses, which might run 15%, 20%, 30%, 40%, whatever it is. Everybody's going to be different. Once again, got other videos where we talk about this, but ultimately you want to know the difference between the two because you're going to try to control and manage what those are. You're going to find better things. A lot of times when we have to use materials in our expenses, we actually spend more than we should because we have poor processes in place, or a purchasing thing. If I have to clean this pen up, the parts up before I can do the pen, I have a broken process. Maybe I've got someone who's slow at cleaning them. Maybe I'm spending money that I don't need to be spending to clean them. Or maybe I can just purchase them better on the cost of goods side and just how much more does it cost me to get them already ready to use or whatever the case may be. So I'm kind of talking about a bunch of different things here. My main goal here today is to understand the difference between cost of goods and expenses. Expenses, once again, those are just operational expenses for you to be able to run your business, to provide, and to be able to make sure you have what it takes for you to be able to take care of your customers and your clients, right? Your cost of goods are the products, materials, ingredients, and labor necessary for you to be able to provide that. That's why not all labor is the same. Only the labor to assemble the pen is counted as a cost of good. The office manager side, or the people in the office or people behind the scenes running the business, those are expense sides. Those are the operational expenses when it comes to it. Now, some other items that sometimes people will ask is, Tammy, what about gas? Because I have to have gas to go to the client. Once again, to provide it, you don't need the gas. The gas is an operational expense because of who you choose to help. As a client, you just happen to have your office way over here and you got to spend the gas to go over to get to them. Gas is a expense. Now, if you run a trucking company and the only way that you can get to the job, well, that's different because now I'm looking at my gas because it's different because the gas is used in the production of the service. In order for me to provide it, I have to have the gas. I can't do I cannot get the product to the customer without gas because I cannot get that truck to move. If I run a service-based business, I can install the water heater without the gas. I can get there on my bicycle. I can get there on a bus. I can get there and I can still provide the product or service. So that way, does that kind of make sense? That's why that's more of an expense. Whereas if I'm a trucking company, I cannot truck without the gas. Another example of that might be, let's say you sell things on eBay or PayPal or whatever the case may be. You're going to get fees and stuff like that. Well, fees are a cost of doing business, right? You have to use their payment processing and whatnot. So usually those are going to be expenses, but some people, they want to put them as a cost of good. Not going to be mad at you either way because it is part of it. You are stuck with their payment system. Whereas some other systems, you're not necessarily stuck with their particular payment system. It's really an expense. It's a cost of doing that business. But if you have shipping that you have to pay, right, no matter what, it has to be shipped, can you use that as a cost of goods? Yeah, shipping can be a couple different things. If I'm shipping out boxes and I'm shipping out stuff to be able, and it's the only way I can get them to them is through that shipping, could I make that a cost of goods? Probably. You know what? If I'm shipping out other stuff in the business, that's probably going to be more operational. You can make a case for anything, you really can. But if you kind of keep in mind what is truly a cost of good sold, that really is going to be what it costs you to provide the product or service. All right. And everything else is operational. You need it to be able to run your business. If you use that as a rule of thumb, you're going to be right the majority of the time. Whenever I'm talking with somebody, we don't get into some big old battle like what's right, what's wrong. Should I do it this way? Should I not? It's just, hey, I go back to the first one that I was telling you. It's just when we lump everything into supplies, job supplies specifically, they're not always true. You want to make sure that you separate those out because you want to know how much you're spending on actual core materials, ingredients, or products to provide your product or service. But you also want to know how much you're spending on tools, materials, cleaning, all the other stuff in order to be able to provide that. That's more of the expense side. So I always like to get those separated out so that you can track both of those. Because sometimes people are really surprised when they look at over the course of the year and they find out that they spent $15,000, $25,000 on just cleaning and other types of tools, small tools and stuff like that. They're like, holy cow, I didn't realize I spent that much on that. That's one of the reasons why we want to keep them separate. We want to keep things separate and understand them because it helps us make better business decisions. For example, one that happened one time was somebody was buying cheap shovels, right? They go to Home Depot, Lowe's, and they find the $5, $6 shovel on the shelf. And they're like, we go through shovels like crazy. I'm only going to get the cheaper shovels. And that's what they just keep doing. And then one day they realize, oh my God, I didn't realize that I spent, $8,000 on shovels. But if they were to spend money on the $15 shovel a step up, those shovels were still breaking, but they weren't breaking at the same rate. And they're able to reduce their overall expenses because they're buying a better quality shovel. And a lot of times they're like, they forget the fact that, you might have to throw them out, but there's a difference between throwing them out every single job or going through one or two every single job versus maybe once a month that you have to do it and get rid of it. And if I have a cleaning company, more than likely my vacuum isn't going to last, depending which vacuum I get, it's probably not going to last more than a year. But if I did buy a higher quality one, it might last longer. But if I went to Amazon and bought the cheapest one, I'm probably buying a new vacuum every month just because of the sure differences in the types of homes that I clean. Some people's homes are going to be easier and less rough on something, and others are going to be like full of cat hair, dog hair, and everything else. You get what my point is. But you want to have those in your expenses so you can focus on how do I reduce my expenses, as well as when you're looking at how do I improve the cost of when I purchase things. Right now, we've got all this talk about these tariffs and is it going to make product prices go up and all this other stuff. You want to be able to track that, right? You want to see what happens to my cost of goods. Do my cost of goods go up? So you want to make sure that those are nice and clean so you can see that creep. Is the creep coming from operational things that I can or cannot use, or the absolute necessities to be able to provide the product or service? Those are also impacted. So there's a lot of different things that you can look at when it comes to this as to, hey, why is it under this category? Why is it under this category? Why is it important to me and everything else? So just another way for you to look at it. And like I said, it's one of the very first things that I start looking at with people when I'm looking at their books and whether I'm coaching them or doing their books or whatever the case may be. I look at that stuff because I really do think it helps us make different decisions. And I've watched people that once they start tracking it separately, maybe not so much in year one, but in year two, they start doing things differently because it starts to add up, and they were missing it before, like I said, because it was all lumped together into one thing. Once again, the minute they start separating things out, once they actually had some cost of goods, because like I said, they might have been running without any kind of cost of goods, and now they've got cost of goods and they're like, holy cow, I didn't realize this. Or vice versa, they were dumping everything into cost of goods and not doing them as expenses, and now they're like, wow, I can really impact this. I didn't realize I was spending that much money. It's one of the reasons why we want to start looking at our P&Ls. We really want to look and understand these things. We want to understand why it's sales minus cost of goods minus expenses equals that profits. So we can look at each of those categories and really dive in and really help fine tune our business so that we can make more money. And also, when you watch any of the videos on pricing, it really comes in handy when you are setting your prices. So this way you can understand what it is that you're making at the end of the day. What are you truly making, not what you think you're making? I mean, like I said, we started off with this pen, I might sell it for $1 and I think I'm paying 50 cents and I think I've got 50 cents in the bank, and it turns out I've got 10 cents in the bank. It's all of those expenses that I wasn't thinking about or I wasn't paying attention to. I need to know where my money's going. Why am I only ending up with 10 cents when I thought I was making 50 cents as opposed to this. Now, when you're first starting out, can you lump them all together just to kind of get a feel to get going? Yeah, that's fine. But once you start getting some momentum behind you and once you start spending some money, you want to start separating that stuff out. In the very beginning, you don't know what those numbers are. You're taking wild guesses. I get it. But once you start getting some information, you start getting some data, it's going to help you run a better business. More importantly, it's going to help you be more profitable. And with that, I know I talked about a lot of different things. Hopefully it helps you understand and it makes some sense. And we will be back next week with some more tips and stuff to help you have better business numbers. Remember, it's not about the math. It's about what are the numbers telling you and how you can run a better, more profitable business. And with that, I am out of here and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.